Hi there, and welcome to the Leadership Roots podcast with me, Mark Redmond. In this podcast, I explore what lies at the root of great leadership. I have conversations with leaders from diverse backgrounds. Today, my guest is somebody who leads Ireland's largest private sector employer, and her teams help their clients to overcome and seize opportunities and challenges. In fact, some of the greatest ones facing us today globally, from decarbonisation to harnessing the power of AI. She's very proud of her Dublin roots, and she's also a passionate advocate for inclusion and equality. She was nominated and indeed awarded Irish Businesswoman of the Year by Irish Tatler in 2025. And for the past 3 years, she has led as Country Managing Director Accenture in Ireland. She also got another big job more recently when she was appointed Resources Industry Group Lead by Accenture for their European, Middle Eastern and African markets, or EMEA. Hilary O'Meara, you're most welcome to the Leadership Roots podcast.
Thanks, Mark. I'm looking forward to the conversation and delighted to be here.
Great to have you here. And I'm conscious, Hilary, we're sitting not very far from two of the iconic Accenture buildings in Dublin, your own offices and, of course, the amazing dock.
Yes.
Would you mind giving us an overview of Accenture's presence in Ireland and what your teams do?
Brilliant. Well, you actually articulated very nicely there in the introduction, so thank you for that. But I suppose Accenture is a global organisation, and we work, across 120 countries with nearly 800,000 people. So wherever business is being done, we're there. So we're really at a global scale. And that scale, to your point, translates then into an Irish context. We're 56 years in Ireland, which we're very, very proud of. We've over 6,000 people. We've 3 offices in Dublin. We've 1 in Cork. And we've got, 100 nationalities, speaking 40 languages. And I'm 32 years in Accenture in Ireland. And when I look back, there's 100 people when I first joined. We probably spoke about 4 or 5 languages between us. So the journey that we've been on in my time here has been really amazing. What do we do? Hard to articulate very simply, but ultimately we're helping our clients or organisations to manage and drive change, whether that be building out their technology platforms, whether that be running part of their operation, whether that be reskilling and training their workforce for the future, whatever it is they need to accelerate the transformation that pretty much all organisations are on today. And what I love about our business, and me particularly in my role, is that we're very local. So we run it as a local leadership team here in Dublin with autonomy to make decisions. But we're also part of something bigger, which I think has really helped us. And we can tap into the expertise, we can tap into the investments that Accenture is making globally, and our clients really value that. And I think it's been a big part of our success.
Some amazing numbers there, both in terms of scale and heritage. And I'm mindful that you are advising the world's top companies and public and private sector organisations in every sector you care to mention. So you're by definition ahead of where they're currently at. How do you remain agile while being part of such, an enormous 800,000 plus global team?
Yeah, it's really important that when you're supporting clients and advising clients, you have to always be ahead of them. And that's getting more challenging as time goes on because, when we were first working with our clients, they would want to know, where have you done this 10 times before? But with the pace of change, it's now about, where have you done this 3 times before? Or it may be, we're going to draw on all of our expertise and we're actually going to experiment and do this for the first time. And more we're doing things for the first or second time, and we're really at the frontier. So that's very exciting, but it means we're now in a world of co-creation with our clients. And that's why I think being a global organisation really helps, because we can pull on expertise from all around the world, because somebody's done something similar to what we're trying to do. And because we're one global organisation, we can draw on that talent. But we can never be complacent, the point you made. We always have to stay ahead. And we're constantly, our word at the moment is reinvention. We have to constantly reinvent ourselves. So we're turning up fresh to our clients with new ideas and with the skills that they need. So we're on a massive reskilling ourselves at the moment, because obviously we're now in the age of intelligence and we are reskilling everybody in Accenture to a greater or lesser degree, but everybody's going through rigorous training at the moment because we want to be the most AI-enabled workforce in the world.
And I want to come back to the power of AI with you later in the conversation, but I first of all would love to talk to you about your own leadership journey, because it is fascinating. And for me as a leadership coach, the role of sponsors is so important in a leader's journey. But I know you in particular are grateful to two sponsors at a very pivotal time in your early journey. Would you mind talking about the impact they had on you and the difference they made to you as a leader?
There have been so many mentors I've had. I've been very fortunate in my time in Accenture. I suppose the earliest is probably a lady called Vivian Jupp. She was the first female partner in Ireland. She was the first female partner in Europe. And she took an interest in me very, very early on. And she'd meet me regularly saying, okay, where are you in your career? You know, why aren't you taking on a bigger job? Why aren't you knocking on such and such's door to ask for more responsibility? Which was not my personality and, you know, made me very uncomfortable. But she pushed me because she wanted to see me do well. She also used to bring us together in her house back in the day when we were smaller, you know, and create that network of women supporting women. And she pretty much dragged me up through the organisation and gave me the confidence to put myself out there. And I do remember the day that I got promoted to Managing Director or partner. She rang me to congratulate you and she said, right, now we're on to the next one. And she was on it again. So she still instilled in me something to have that career focus and that drive. The other person I'd probably call out is Ian Slattery, simply because I worked with him for, 7 or 8 years consistently. And he was one of those great authentic leaders who gave you the space, empowered you to do things for yourself, but always there to answer questions and have your back. So you always felt safe when you were working for him. And he had a great expression that I'll never forget and live with to this day: never look over the edge. And what he meant by that is I was running my first ever big program where I was ultimately accountable. And that can be daunting and overwhelming when you realise, gosh, this is what I'm being asked to do. But actually he was like, live in the now, focus on the work, have one eye on what's happening next week and next month and over the next 6 months, but never look over the edge and everything will be okay. And that was great advice. I would have to call out the two country managing directors that went before me, Mark and Alistair. You know, they had that same leadership style that I mentioned about Ian, empowered, kept you, made you feel safe. And Mark actually gave me my first break in Accenture. He appointed me the technology lead at a time when I was coming back from maternity leave after, having two small kids, very small kids at home. I didn't think I could do that job. He obviously trusted it in me, and it was probably a defining moment and accelerated my career. So I've had lots of mentors, lots of sponsors. I'm very lucky.
And this was Mark Ryan.
Mark Ryan, yes. Mark Ryan, Alistair Blair, yeah.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it just shows you the importance of making time to see somebody else and making that effort, right, which doesn't really cost us anything. But can you take us back to how you felt as that, slightly anxious, maybe inner critic going on person, probably nodding at Vivian Jupp and, grateful for what you're saying to you, but still that voice of doubt. Just take us through what that felt like and how you actually then came to become a believer.
I mean, are we ever believers? I mean, I would still be quite self-critical. I would still have a very high standard for myself, as most people do. But I suppose experience teaches you things. And also I did many different roles in Accenture. So, I had that technology lead role that we talked about. I actually was seconded into a client for 2 years. So that was a really big, steep learning curve to take on a different culture and a different way of working. I was COO of our UK and Ireland business for a period and other roles. And I suppose the culmination of all those roles give you confidence that no matter what work throws at you or life throws at you, you're going to be able to find your way through. In Accenture, we have an expression: the most successful people ask for help. And I'm lucky that I'm okay with asking for help. It comes naturally to me. So whenever I have self-doubt, I'll pick up the phone, I'll ask someone, I tell them how I'm feeling, and they'll lean in and reassure me and help me through it. So I think self-criticism in some ways is a waste of time. It is exhausting, but everybody has a self-critic, and it actually fuels you on and helps you to do better and helps you to set a higher standard, as long as you keep it somewhat in control, then I think there's no harm to have a little bit of that, because it gives you the push and the edge you need.
And I'm delighted you said that, Hilary, because actually a lot of the clients I work with would make that very point. And I'm curious about that, because I'm curious about how you harness what can actually be a negative voice, someone that's feeding into your self-doubt, harness that into turning it into a positive energy. What if you're advising somebody else how you do this, how do you do it?
I think it comes back to the point I was making there about asking for help and talking to people. So it depends on where the self-criticism is coming from. You know, I mean, if you're in a really bad place, that I would recommend getting coaching. Mark, you're available for coaching, but it can really help. Like, I have had coaches over the years, and sometimes I've left it almost too late to go and speak to the coach, and you always come out feeling more confident. But people in your organisation, or even outside your organisation, can also be coaches to you. So just leaning in either to the team or to individuals. And in my case, sometimes I'll actually lean on my husband. Like, we're pretty good at leaning on each other. So I'm really feeling down about something, I might just say, you know, can I chat about this? And he'll only raise his eyes and go, there you go again. But like, you know, and then just call out the facts and off you go. For me, it's about talking, leaning on people, and then just working through it.
See, I think that's really important, because I don't think leaders should feel sheepish about talking about work at home. Because, as you say, it helps clarify things, work things out, even by verbalising it to somebody you trust, that you mightn't be able to do in the workplace. Now, you're right, you probably do need to have that patient and empathetic partner, but it's really healthy, and it's not negative work-life balance. I think it's actually positive.
Yeah, no, I'd agree. I mean, I do take my work home, hopefully not in a negative way, but I remember when I first had kids, I remember I'll never be able to see me with a laptop. You know, work has to be work, and home is home, and all those things. But, you know, then you realise, no, it's part of who I am. And with hybrid working anyway now, where the line is blurred. But I remember my son he's doing his leaving cert, and he had exams last week, and he had a big day, and I also had a big day. I was talking at something, and you know, he knew I was talking at something, and he said to me the last thing at the door is, good luck with your presentation this afternoon, Mum. And I just, that really touched me, because he was having a big day, but he knew Mum was having a big day too. So like, I think it's okay to talk about work at home, as long as obviously it's got boundaries and it's not completely taking over.
Totally. But I mean, also, it's great for our children to know what we do, the impact we have, and it gives them an example to look to. Maybe I want to do what Mum does, maybe I don't, but at least I know what it is, right? So that's good. Hilary, I love the fact also you called out leaders should ask for what they need. And I remember you said, when you were appointed as country managing director for Accenture, you said you were thrilled and confident because you knew there were people around you that you could look to, right? And I think that's amazing, because I suspect a lot of people, when they're appointed leaders, thrilled and confident is probably not the first two words that come to mind. But there must have been, in the intervening 3 years, times when it was lonely to be at the top. And I'd love to get your advice on how you managed that and how you saw your way through that.
Yeah, I mean, obviously any leader at all levels feel lonely at times, you know, that's normal and to be expected. During tougher times, you know, I'm a collaborator, and I would actually bring the leadership team together, and we would talk through big decisions that need to be made, pros and cons, what's the right thing. Sometimes you'll have very strong consensus and you're good. The lonelier moments are probably when, you know, the way forward isn't so clear. And ultimately you have to make the decision on the right way to go. But I've always found, you know, making the decision is really important, and then articulating why you've made the decision and the way that you've made it. People will come with you. Even if they don't fully agree, they will come with you on the journey if they understand the rationale for the decision. So I just think it's part of being a leader to feel alone at times. And, you know, the buck stops with you. You're the one who has to make the final decision. And I suppose 32 years later, I'm okay with that. I get that that's part of the job, and I'm comfortable with it.
And I love the way you mapped that out. And let me just play it back to you to make sure I'm understanding it correctly. First of all, if it's tough decision territory we're talking about, first of all, as leader, you need to be able to show the rigour that went into the process of arriving at a decision, speaking to all the people who will be directly delivering or executing that decision.
Agreed.
But then communicating it in a clear way and pointing to, this is why we're going in that direction. This is the journey I'm bringing you on. Because you have an amazing, diverse workforce, you're not expecting everybody to salute it and agree with it, but you're expecting them to get behind it.
Yeah, agree. And I think that's really important. And I think, employees are crying out for very clear direction. They want to know the strategy. That comes across consistently in the feedback. So you set the strategy and then you communicate the strategy to them, and then you come back and revisit it and share how you're progressing against that. So we just had an All-Ireland, town hall about 2 weeks ago now, where we were giving an update on how we're doing against our strategy and plan, and just reassuring people that we're going in a certain direction and that we're on track against what we had set out to do. And that just gives people confidence that you're sharing with them and they know the direction the organisation is going.
And on the communication, I want to focus on this now because, again, from the work I do, I see effective, clear, authentic communication just so important to be a great leader. You have an extraordinary pool of talented people. I think you mentioned 100 nationalities and cross-generational, right? Yes. So what's the secret, Hilary? What's your advice to leaders who are, maybe in a growing team and it's becoming more multicultural, it's becoming more cross-generational? What's your advice to them to remain authentic and compelling and really reach all those audiences to the best of our ability?
I think you need to understand who works for you and where they're coming from. So listening is actually really important. And I think we're good at listening. We have a very strong HR director who is continuously polling and listening to people's feedback. Then you need to communicate. So you need to communicate in a broadcast. You need to communicate in smaller groups. So we obviously are organised by communities or groups, and we really encourage them to communicate the message down. And then they need to be communicating one-to-one within teams and then into individuals. So we're a people business, right? So, we're only as good as the people that we've got working for us. So we spend an awful lot of time talking to people. And it's hard, to your point, especially when you're at a scale of over 6,000 people. You don't communicate well every day to everybody, but you get up the next day and you get back on the horse and you go again. So I think communication is key, that they understand where you're coming from, you understand what they're looking for, and you lead from the front very visibly.
But on that advice path you've advocated there, it's the listening piece. It's asking the questions before you speak. Sounds to me to be so important, and a great leader should be asking great questions and really actively listening before they communicate. Fair?
Agree.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And even for me and my leadership team, I like to listen to where they're at, what they're finding okay, what they're struggling with, how are things at home. I do carve out time to meet them one-to-one as much as I can. And invite them to share so that I'm really listening, and then from there you can kind of take action. I often find as well, at leadership meetings, we would get together for a full day once a month. Some would go, oh, that's a full day out, are you mad? But I actually think it's really important, because we'll talk about the big ticket items of the day or the things that we're working towards, and we have space for debate. And then I'll often find myself even a week later driving home and they're still ringing in my ears some of what people said, and maybe one small comment in the room could actually have a profound impact on me later, and we might drive that forward and take that forward. So it's really back to listening is the point. I'm kind of agreeing with you that listening is just so important, and they get the space to be able to share what's on their mind, and that really helps fuel where we go next.
See, that's really powerful, and not every organisation has created that space where people are prepared to go out on a limb. It may sound crazy, but there's a germ of great innovation in what they said. So love that. Now, Hilary, you got the second big job on top of the first big job. I can only imagine you had to make some changes about how you manage your time, how you delegate, maybe getting tougher on some situations. What did you do?
Yeah, last year was probably a tough enough year for me, actually, compared to when I got the country managing director role, because then we had two big roles and you're trying to manage your time across both. and make sure you're giving the best to both roles. And I found that hard at the start, particularly as I was getting up to speed in the new role. What did I do? I invested the time in the new role a little bit more than just for a period, getting to know people, getting to meet people, to understand the business. And then I actually got help around me. So I did get support in, I have a chief of staff now in the Irish context who can take some of the heavy lifting from me, which has been hugely helpful, and that's been fantastic. And so now I can learn from both roles actually, and the Irish team have a great advantage because I hear what's going on in Europe early, and where the firm is going and the organisation is going, and I can take that back really early to the Irish team straight away, and we can start to implement it. So that's been really fantastic. But what I've got to work really hard on is making sure I'm giving a fair allocation of time to both roles, knowing where I need to lean in and where I need to lean in others to get the job done for me.
I want to move now to your incredible advocacy for inclusion and equality. And it's been a journey for you because, again, you've said that there was times earlier in your career where you almost felt guilty for being a woman and where you didn't feel authentic at the table, if that makes sense. Can you give the sense of how that felt like at that time and what happened since?
Well, I suppose inclusion and diversity is very important to me because I was a woman in a very male-dominated industry if you go back 30 years ago. And so I have had huge learnings over the last 30 years. So I suppose my first 10 years in Accenture, I didn't really notice that I was the only woman because, to be honest, we were a young team, we were doing exciting work. We were at the coalface of what was going on in the country when it came to building big technology systems. I was a heavy part of the Pulse project for An Garda Síochána, for example. But when I became a senior manager, I joined a leadership team for the first time, and I was on a team that was only men. And I again didn't notice there was anything different or unusual about that. I just got on with it. I mean, I have two brothers at home, so I came from a house where it was mostly men. But when the second female joined that team, I remember walking out of a meeting with her one day and saying, I didn't really agree with that point. Did you? And she said, no, I thought this. And I said, so did I. I said, maybe next time if one of us speaks up, the other will back them. So if you speak up, I'll speak up. And we did that. And that really took a burden off me that I didn't realise I was even carrying. And then a year later, a third female joined the team. And the dynamic of the entire team changed. And everybody was more open and everybody was less guarded. And the meeting became much more enjoyable, much more productive and much more effective. So I learned very early on that diverse teams are important and you're at your best when you've got different people with different points of view and you bring all that together and you make the right decision and you move forward on that basis. So I learned that lesson incredibly early on. Another story that I always come back to is we were working on a project and it was coming up close to Christmas, and there was a very senior managing director from the UK leading that programme, and he had gone his holidays. They just happened culturally to go earlier than we do in Ireland, and the client wanted to have another workshop in Christmas week, and it wasn't expected, and I was like, what are we going to do? The lead is not here. And this gentleman, I'll never forget it, he said, Hilary, I'll take it on. I lead that workshop. And I didn't know him. And he wasn't, I suppose, in my circle of people I worked with. And he was a little bit different. So I was unsure of whether he had the right DNA to lead this workshop versus the person who was owning the programme. But I said, okay, let's do it. And I'll never forget the feedback from that workshop was incredible. The client was so excited. And it was, again, another moment where I went, somebody who thought differently, took a different approach to the workshop, and actually was just as effective, if not more effective. And again, another learning moment, different teams, different perspectives, different backgrounds, actually makes things better.
I want to fast forward now to an event you hosted at the end of last year with Beck Bailey, who's the Global Diversity Officer for Accenture. And I want to read something from your post because it was very powerful, your post about that event. Inclusion means recognising the unique value that each individual brings and, crucially, making sure they feel it. It means listening, learning and leading with empathy. And I love the fact you used the word empathy because it's getting a bad press in some quarters right now. But that phrase, Hilary, making sure they feel it. How would you advise a leader who's not sure they're making their people feel that sense of they're valued, their uniqueness is valued? I'm an empathetic leader. What's your advice?
Well, the first thing I'd say is we don't all do it every day. I mean, Beck Bailey said something very poignant when he was in Dublin, because he is, as you said, our Chief Diversity Officer. And he said, I don't get this right every day. And that really struck a chord with me, because we're not all on our best day every day. So the advice I'd give is just be yourself, be authentic, go back to listening. Some people in our organisation would say that making people feel valued and included is personalised to each individual, which is really hard to do in a big organisation. So you just have to go, person by person, almost interaction by interaction, and lean in and, make people feel how you want to feel, treat people like you want to be treated, and pull on all of the experiences of the great leaders you've worked for. And I always say, leave the negative about leaders that you've worked for behind, and don't do that. But it's hard. And I think once you know you're not going to get it right every day, then it becomes easier and you just do the best you can.
And I think that's so important to say that. It's not being too tough on yourself as a leader, because you're not there to be perfect, but you're there to do your very, very best every day to the best of your ability. And that also speaks to what you were talking about earlier, channeling the inner critic. And again, you won't be surprised when I tell you that so many of my clients, both genders, do suffer from imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
I shouldn't be at this table. I'm going to be found out. I'm not good enough. Again, what's your coaching advice to folks in that situation?
I would say fuel it. It's really hard to dumb it down, I find anyway, but I would say fuel it. Do the best you can. But as I was saying to you earlier, I think it's also, we're talking to people, whether it is a coach like yourself or whether it's just a colleague in work. That's what I would always do. I also prep really well. If it was my inner critic was about a deliverable or it was something I was going to do, I'd make sure I'm well prepped. And I'd lean on people to support me to do that. I go back to what I was saying earlier, the most successful people ask for help. There's another thing, I don't know if it's quite related, but it's something that I learned about 4 years ago now, because I was leading a leadership program for the UK and Ireland as the CEO of the UK and Ireland. And we came up with this word, wise compassion. So the wise meaning you need to lead a business for results. You need to have the business acumen. You need to make the tough decisions as a leader. So you need to lead wisely, but you can still do that with compassion. So if you're giving the tough feedback that you talked about, you give it, putting yourself in the shoes of the person you're delivering the feedback and do it in a truly human way. You do it in a kind way. So you can be tough and rule with the head and lead with the head, should I say, but you can also lead with the heart at the same time. So, anyone who says empathy is not an important word or showing vulnerability isn't important, I think they're very important. And I think, the world is in a pretty tricky place, as we all know. And actually the word I keep leaning to now in more recent months is courage, and leading with courage and being brave enough to live by your values, and speak when you feel something needs to be said. So yeah, I went a long way from being the self-critical question you asked me there, but it's really get it to fuel you and what you want to be, and then lean on people to help you dumb down that critic that's rolling around in your head.
But I love that observation that leaders need to understand where their people are at.
Yes.
What their lived experience is.
Yes.
And that enables and empowers what you said earlier about communicating in a way that it makes sense to them and they understand the journey they're being brought on. I love that.
Yeah.
Before I go on to artificial intelligence, I want to go back a sec to self-care. And because again, I'm looking here for ideas, Hilary, because as you know, so many leaders, they neglect self-care.
Yes.
You've spoken earlier about how it's been helpful for you just to work through work issues at home with your husband. Is there something else concrete you can point to that you do as a self-care activity?
Yeah, I wasn't great at self-care when I was a young mum. So any young mum listening or any young parent listening, it's so important to make time for yourself. I wasn't great at that, and I look back and recognise that now. But I learned the lesson. And I think actually COVID gave me a great gift, because we were forced to slow down a little bit. We were, we got back out, we went walking. We were out in nature a bit more. And actually through COVID, when we went back to getting out and meeting people, I started walking with 2 school friends again who, I was still friendly with, but it was not as often or not as frequent. And we started to walk on a Saturday morning, and we have kept it up now, or probably, I don't know how long are we gone since COVID, over 5 years. And it's been really great for me, because you're in a very busy week. It's very intense. You're juggling a lot. And then you go out the front door on a Saturday morning, and by the time you get back, you're just ready for the weekend. You're ready for your family. You've left the work behind you, and you get to just be a mother, a friend, someone walking a dog, as opposed to, looking after 6,000 plus people in Accenture. I also exercise. I think that's important, and I found time to do that again. All really since COVID. Before that, I wasn't great at looking after myself, to be honest. I suppose the older you get, you realise how important it is. And sometimes when you're younger, you feel a bit more invincible. But I would really encourage people to be doing that whatever works for them, to be doing it, because it just fills you back up to be able to go again once Monday morning comes the following week.
But it's interesting that, and is that sacred space the walk with those 2 friends?
It's so
sacred
protected.
Space. Love it.
And the 3 of us are the same, and my husband knows not to interfere with that walk.
Brilliant. That's so important, right?
It is, yeah.
But it just listening to it strikes me, you lead in a collegial way, because you spoke about your 2 women colleagues back in the day in Accenture,
yes,
that empowered that kind of voice being heard. But this is different, however. Your self-care is also, it's almost like a collegial activity. But it means it's not just you're kind of commissioned to 2 other people.
Yes, I agree.
I'm doing this walk every Saturday, which is lovely. Jumping now on, Hilary, to artificial intelligence, and as I asked this question, I always feel Accenture is in the intelligence business, right? That's what you're good at. And we know artificial intelligence has incredible opportunity and power. But we also know we have to balance it with intelligence.
Yes.
And it's the complete offering Accenture brings. But would you mind doing me a favour, because it can be confusing for lay people.
Yeah.
For your average leader in a business, can you say 3 things they should be thinking about when it comes to the opportunities of AI?
Okay, I would say first and foremost, there's a lot of hype, but don't let that blind you. I think there is a sense of urgency when it comes to this. And I think if you're a leader in an organisation, you can't leave it to somebody else. You can't leave it to the CIO. You need to be really immersing yourself in AI, really understand what it means and what it means for your organisation, and set the direction from the front. So lead with urgency and set the direction. I think the second thing is leading with value, or focusing on value. Why do I say that? It's not AI for AI's sake. It's not easy. It's costly, it costs money. So you have to really see the return, the investment, and you have to be using it for something, therefore, that matters to either the top line or the bottom line. So the focus on value, being really clear in the strategic direction, where you're going to apply it, make sure you're experimenting in those areas, and then get the barriers out of the way for the organisation as they come up. So leading from the front and leading and focusing on value. And I think thirdly, no matter where you are in the journey, you have to get ready. The technology and the digital core needs to be in place. So get your technology right. And really importantly, you need to get your workforce ready. So a lot of people are very nervous about what AI means for jobs, for their own futures. So reassuring them, communicating with them, and supporting them to reskill by giving them the tools to learn about AI and get comfortable with it and get confident with it. So they'd be the 3 things
Great
I would
advice.
recommend.
Hilary, thank you. We've come to the end of an amazing discussion, Hilary, and before I try and summarise some takeaways for my audience and me, is there a book that you particularly liked that's about leadership or about leaders that you'd recommend?
Well, I'm actually listening to an audio book at the moment, and I'm sure everybody has heard of this person because it's gone a bit viral at the moment, but Brené Brown, Dare to Lead. It just really resonated with me, a lot of what she said. She talks a lot about vulnerability. She talks a lot about courage. She talks a lot about feedback. You brought that up as well. So many of the things that we touched upon. And I don't read these books very often, but maybe once, twice a year. But they definitely remotivate you to go again, to be the better listener, to do all the things that we've been talking about during the discussion. And I've already put into practice some money. I'm nearly there, but I'm already putting into practice some of the things I read. So that's one I'd recommend.
It's a great recommendation. Hilary, I am going to try and summarise some takeaways from this great conversation. And what I learned was just the importance of sponsors and the importance of people who see you, see your capability, but leaning into those sponsors. And indeed, even if you are a chief executive or a country managing director, you need to lean in on the smart people around you. You need to ask for help. You need to do self-care, whatever works for you. In your case, it's a sacred space with 2 friends, which is amazing. You also need, in terms of bringing your people with you, you need to show empathy. You need to do your best to ask the great questions, understand where they're at, and then communicate with them in a way that is meaningful for them on the journey you're taking them. You used a lovely phrase, wise compassion. So that balance between, strong judgment, but again, being empathetic to your people. And I think the Brené Brown book, Dare to Lead, that courage thing you also spoke about as well. And then when it comes to AI, the chief executive can't delegate it. The chief executive needs to understand it, needs to understand the value that AI can bring to their organisation and their customers, and focus on getting the technology and workforce ready. Is that a fair summary of?
That's an amazing summary. Well done.
It's been an amazing conversation. So that brings us to the end of this episode of the Leadership Roots podcast with my great guest, Hilary O'Meara. I hope you have enjoyed it. And if you have, I'd be most grateful if you could rate it, review it, like it, and repost it in all the usual places. I want to say a special thanks to my producer, Jonathan de Burka Butler, and I look forward to welcoming you to the next episode. Until then, stay safe and well. Bye.